being called out for being a woman. What is the organization doing about it?
So I was barely 35 or something when I became the president of ZTV. There are innumerable instances where people will either say something and ignore and move on. Women have been trained, unfortunately, from childhood for it to be an either or. Either you can be a great professional or you can be a great mother. When we are talking about diversity, how do we create empowerment for women?
When I look at Aazol, I look at it as a company formed at the intersection of women, food, and the environment.
Currently, we work with around 26 self-help groups, around 1,000 women in different parts of Maharashtra. There is also a huge sense of self-esteem. Mera product Bombay mein bik raha hai. It is said that if women work to their full potential, which they are not currently, India's GDP will improve by. Tell these women you can't give up. Unless we have 50% women at the top, you can't give up.
Hello and welcome to Beyond Pink. The guest I have today is someone who absolutely deserves to be on this podcast because of her work not only as a CEO, but also because of what she is doing now. Apurva Purohit was president of the Jagran Group. She went on to write 2 bestsellers about women in corporate India. Now, Apurva is doing something very interesting. She has created a brand called Aazol. Till date, Aazol has impacted the lives of 1,000 women and farmers across Maharashtra. Thank you, Apurva, for coming on Beyond Pink.
Thank you for inviting me, Sangeeta.
I know that you were a CEO in a very rarefied industry called the media. Mm-hmm. Give me a few nuggets of what it was like to be a woman CEO in a usually male-dominated industry. How did it feel to be probably the only woman in the room?
So, in fact, all my life I've been the only woman in the room.
Okay.
So, and I think over a period of time you get used to it because I think right from a very early age, I started with the premise that I am and will be a good professional. I'm not a good woman professional. I'm just a great professional and I just happen to be a woman. So I think the moment I thought of myself like that, increasingly people around me also treated me
responded.
As such. Of course, one faces biases. Of course, one faces glass ceilings and, getting marginalized or subconscious biases, which, one gets aware of only later in life. But all that is there. But keeping that aside, at least my approach always was that, I'm a good professional, treat me like this.
Do you have any very stark example that has just stood in your head about being sidelined or being called out for being a woman?
So I was barely 35 or something when I became the president of ZTV. So from a very, very young age, I've been at the head of the organization. So there was no direct sidelining as such.
Right.
Okay. Or being called out for being a woman. Having said that, there are innumerable instances, Sangeeta, where people will either say something or that there's a subconscious bias operating or they will treat you differently. That perhaps is not a big cut to you, but it is a small cut which keeps on
death by 1,000 cuts.
Yes, it keeps on bothering you or over a period of time, it sort of hurts. Okay. So, I talk about these stories when I talk to all my women mentees. So many years ago, I met one of my batchmates. I studied in IIM and I met a batchmate of mine and I was at that time the president of ZTV and he was a marketing manager in some company. And then he looks at me and then he asks me, "Oh, so you are the CEO of Z currently. I've been following your career. So thank you so much." So then I says, so do you work full-time or part-time?
Okay.
Now, I don't know what to answer.
Yeah.
I don't know what, I mean, have you ever
How
heard of
does a president of a company work part-time?
part-time? So I said, I mean, later on I thought I should have told him that part-time, half the day I go for kitty parties. I mean, what do you
Is
answer?
it just an honorary position that you have been given?
Yeah. So you
It's hurtful.
It's bothersome and hurtful.
Yeah.
Then one of my boards, someone's talking to me and they were talking about the listing ceremony of that particular company.
Yeah.
And he looks at me and says, Apurva, I would encourage you to go for this listing ceremony because I have gone for a listing ceremony of one of my clients, and let me tell you, it's a wonderful experience. So I just looked at him. I said, I have listed a company myself.
Correct.
I have stood on the thing and rung the bell myself.
Right.
I have run 2 listed companies. And you're telling me that you must go. I encourage you to go and attend a listing ceremony.
Right.
So
what did you say to that?
I said this. I said, listen, just to clarify, I have listed a company myself and rung the bell myself.
And what was the response to that?
Ignore and move on. So these kind of comments, you still hear. You still hear. So I don't think they would talk like that to any man.
Absolutely not.
So then what do you do? Sometimes you laugh. Sometimes I take it out by writing a blog about it. So frustration comes out in my LinkedIn blog on this. But I suppose, I mean, you hope the world changes. You hope that, 32 years of a stellar corporate career.
Yes.
And reduced to being asked, I would encourage you to go and attend a listing ceremony. Or
Right.
when someone says, I get introduced and someone's telling them about the companies I've run, the boards that I'm on. I said, we are, by the way, looking for a diversity candidate. You must send your profile to us.
There you go. I mean, this is a separate discussion about what this whole word diversity has come to mean now.
Yes.
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 But that's a whole separate discussion because it's so long that
we need
maybe
another
we'll
podcast
episode for that.
Yeah.
So I guess when you say you were writing a blog about this, I guess that is what translated into the 2 books,
Yes.
which these very catchy titles, Lady, You Are Not a Man, and Lady, You're the Boss. Yeah, and when I looked at those titles when a few years ago when you published, and I said, hey, the titles are very catchy. How did you think up of the titles yourself?
Yeah. So the first one I wrote, Sangeeta, was many years ago when people had just started talking about diversity, and there I sort of saw these women who were really shattering the glass ceilings for all of us to grow, but they had to virtually become male-like to do that.
Define what do you mean by male-like?
So they had to be far more aggressive than they needed to be. They had to almost, be part of the old boy network, smoking and drinking and being abusive and very manly.
Yeah.
Because when they looked around, they saw that the default gender of leadership is male.
Right.
So therefore, if I have to be there, I have to also be like that. I have to exhibit the same qualities. So the whole purpose of that first book was to tell women, listen, you are born different. Better, worse, nobody's saying that. But you're born different. Now, in your difference lies your strength. So when we are talking about wanting as managers, wanting diversity, we don't want another male in the team. We want a female with a female way of looking at things, with a female POV. Therefore, accept that you're a woman, look at the strengths that women bring to the table and utilize those strengths.
And what are those strengths that women bring to the table?
I think, firstly, they're different. Again, I repeat, it's not better or worse. I think men have different skills, women have different skills.
Okay.
Some things, skills are gender neutral. Good leadership, for example, is gender neutral. But I think women do have a far more collaborative style of working. I feel that they are far more nurturing, genuinely nurturing. I think that they are able to work with diversity far more easily. So, for example, current companies, we are all working with 5 different generations. So, we will have a 55-year-old manager also, a 20-year-old, 25-year-old, 30-year-old. So, 5 very different, from Gen Z to baby boomers. We have everybody in our team.
Yeah.
Each of them have a different way of thinking, a different approach, a different outlook. And I think women are able to manage this different styles of functioning and draw out the best out of everyone.
Okay.
So I definitely think that these two are great skills that women
So
have.
don't try to copy the male persona.
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all.
Then somewhere you mentioned in your book, adapt yourself to reality. What does that mean?
So my first book was broken up into 3 sections: accept, adapt, and achieve. And acceptance we've talked about. Adapting was, again, I think it's a great skill that all human beings have. We have adapted to the changes in the planet, which is why we have reached where we are, right?
Right.
So I think adapting, what I was trying to tell women is that certain things you cannot fight, certain things you cannot avoid. The fact that you are the one who will have the baby, you are the primary caregiver. Okay. There will be 2 years in your career span where you will have to spend
Take a
time.
break.
Take a break.
Yeah.
What can you do? Your husband can't have the baby,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So now we can flail against that and say, oh, so unfair.
Yeah.
Or we can say, okay, this is a role that I have to play.
Yeah.
But let me adapt to this circumstance and let me see how I can do this without letting go of my career. Because I think women have been trained, unfortunately, from childhood for it to be an either or. Either you can be a great professional or you can be a great mother. And the guilt that a lot of women live with, okay, I left my child, I didn't go for his PTA, I left him when he was ill. I think all women, scratch the surface, every woman will have a guilt story.
Yes.
Guilt story.
Yes.
So how do you get out of that guilt? How do you create an ecosystem around you which will help you nurture your child?
Let it not be just the woman's burden or the society's burden. What is the organization doing about it? The organization says, okay, manage your situation, but what is the organization?
The organization is also a partner in the whole thing.
Yes. So I would assume that, these are mid-level professionals. It's always the case that mid-level professionals are the ones who have to go off to take, to have a family.
Yes.
That's when the break comes in their career. What about top level? What about people like you who led organizations? What about those women?
So, Sangeeta, that's where I wrote my second book, which is Lady or the Boss. So, the first book was written for younger women who are going through all this husband's transfer, children, etc., etc. The second book I wrote because when I was talking to a lot of women around me, I realized that many of them have reached senior levels, as you say.
They have reached senior levels.
So they become vice president and senior vice president, etc.
Yes.
Head of a department.
Yes.
But then again, at the top layer, there are no women.
There are no women.
So 30% women, we know there are 30% women at the bottom and the middle level. There are 15% women at the mid level, and there are only 5% women who become CEOs. So there's a 2/3 of senior women never reach the top. So what is happening there? Why such competent, confident women who have gone through that whole issue of childbirth and husband's transfer and biases and managed to reach
and
vice
held on
president?
to their position.
But then why are they not able to move up to the next rung? And there I found something very interesting, which is that at this level, what is happening is a lot of women are getting tired. They fought to reach. Now they're saying, chalo, I am now the HOD. There is no other woman HOD.
Right.
So now I've reached the top. Now why do I have to fight one more battle to move up?
Yeah.
So they are becoming a little, you can say tired, or you can say complacent. You can say, okay, this is
Content.
my level of is my level of achievement.
This is my level of
comfortable.
achievement.
Equally, I also saw that there is a kind of almost an invisibility cloak on these senior women. They are so competent, they are so good, but the CEO for some reason is not seeing them as his successor.
Contenders.
Or even the contender to become a COO. And then I sort of diving deeper, and you realize that that's where really a lot of subconscious biases are operating. So we have wonderful men who are CEOs, and they're really, really good people. They're really conscious of diversity. But they're also being so, no, if I offer her the next role, she'll have to do 200 days of travel. I don't think she's going to be able to do it. In their minds, how will she travel? Oh, this is a sales role. Oh, this is a very tough client-facing role. I don't think a woman can do it. Or I am a male CEO. How can a woman replace me? Or just the comfort of, I know how to interact with males, so let all my
or if it's a manufacturing organization, then it's a very rough and tough environment.
But this is in your mind. Have you even checked with a woman whether she's going to be able to do that?
Right.
And the comfort also, I think somewhere, if 95% of leaders are male, they will want only males around them. Not in a very obvious manner, but just because they're more comfortable. And I don't blame them in a way, because that's how human beings are.
You want your own club.
You want your own club. You want people like you. I know how Sangeeta will think. So Sangeeta can be part of my... But I don't know how Ramesh will think. And therefore, the second book was written to tell these women, you can't give up. Unless we have 50% women at the top, you can't give up.
Okay.
So have that confidence in yourself.
So you have that confidence. You go up and ask. If you never ask, you'll never get.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So you have to ask. You have to be confident. You have to put yourself out there.
And you can't give up. Absolutely.
So I know that diversity is not the word to be used, but don't you think there is something to be said for an organization saying, no, we want a woman, we'll get a woman to lead, rather than just leave it on the woman to sort of push herself forward? What is the role that an organization can play actively?
Organizations actually, from a diversity agenda, have been trying to do a lot. Okay. I think there's also a recognition. So when we first started talking about diversity, it was seen as a CSR initiative.
Absolutely,
Chalo, bichari abla nari, usko ek naukri de dete hain, kind of a thing. Over a period of time, I think increasingly organizations and boards are realizing the power of diversity in helping the business results.
Right.
So there's enough research today which talks about heightened business outcomes, better innovation, better stability in an organization if there are more women leaders.
Absolutely.
So that case is also proven. The profitability case linked to diversity is also proven. Still, the numbers are not changing.
Right.
So what is it that organizations can do more? Is the question that you are asking. And I feel that, unfortunately, who's running these organizations? It is still largely men.
So somewhere we have to bring them into the conversation.
We have to bring them into the conversation. They are already into the conversation, but it will take one more generation, because a lot of the men whom we work with have been brought up in a milieu where for example, their mothers were not working.
That's true.
Their wives were not working. It is only this generation who has genuinely seen an equal partner in their wives.
Absolutely.
And therefore, they are the ones who will make the change.
Okay.
They are the ones who will be more accepting of women as equal partners in organizations. So I feel it will take
one sees that in homes in any case.
In our sons' lives, in our daughter-in-law's lives, and how they are absolutely equal partners.
Absolutely. You and I both have sons and we are both seeing the change.
Yes.
So I'm going to talk about another very interesting facet of your life, Aazol. When I look at Aazol, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, when I look at Aazol, I look at it as a company formed at the intersection of three very crucial subjects in our country, which is women, first and foremost, food, and the environment, right? So it's a very interesting confluence of three such powerful, meaningful topics for our country. I want you to describe a little more what motivated you to start Aazol and what is the impact it's having.
So I think you've hit upon the three pillars absolutely correctly. women has been a passion for me for several years, including the books I wrote, etc., etc., and the desire that more and more women stay in the workforce when I was in corporate India or are financially independent. I think everything starts with financial independence, the respect, the self-esteem.
Yeah.
All drive education for the family, health for the family stems from the woman being financially independent and empowered.
Yeah.
We also know as a country, I mean, it is said that if women work to their full potential, which they are not currently, India's GDP will improve by 27%. So there is in that whole Vikshit Bharat, there is this whole vertical of women which needs to grow and succeed. So yes, when we started Aazol, one big thought was how do we create empowerment for women. On the other hand, my son, who's my co-founder, with whom I started Aazol, he's very passionate about the environment. I think that generation, they've seen what we have done to the planet.
Yes.
Climate change is impacting all of us. So he was really passionate about sustainability and environment. That sort of came together when both of us started thinking of the idea at the first instance. Food, in a way, happened serendipitously.
Okay.
So I was coming from the women angle. Siddharth was coming from the environment angle. And we just happened to come across this bunch of lovely ladies from self-help groups who came to Bombay every year to sell their products in an exhibition. So we went to this exhibition and then we saw the deliciousness of the products, the authenticity of the products, and them coming from remote villages. Most of urban India doesn't even know about the products that they're making.
Correct.
They are high quality, they are the traditional, they are authentic, they're made from recipes that women have been using for generations. But they did not have access to a marketplace.
I'm a sucker. By the way, I'm a sucker for those recipes. Anytime I go to such exhibitions, I'm the one who will pick up 10 packets of all of this because it's food that is so close to your heart but remains undiscovered.
Absolutely. And so you are exactly the audience that we are talking to, correct?
Yeah.
So today, increasingly clean label, authentic food, traditional food, preservative-free food,
absolutely,
minimally processed food is what all of us are seeking.
Minimally processed.
From a health angle.
Yes.
Correct now?
Yes.
And we are so used to seeing those gorgeous shelves filled with products that have come from all parts of the world.
Very shiny products.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not realizing that our villages have better quality.
Yeah.
Or, so protein. Why do you make a whey protein? Or why do you have to have a powder when there's a ragi millet that is available? Or there is a kulit peat which is available? So I think the whole idea was to bring...
But that shininess is not there.
Shininess was not, I would correct you by saying that shininess was not there because these women did not know how to market, did not know how to package, did not have access to all these facilities and the infrastructure, right? So our job, Aazol's job became to be the linkage, to become the bridge between an urban consumer such as you who's seeking these products and the women who are making the products. Currently, we work with around 26 self-help groups, around 1,000 women in different parts of Maharashtra and sourcing products from them and helping them with everything from FSSAI guidelines to all the quality checks that they require, to training, to packaging and logistics. So, and of course, building the brand Aazol.
So integrating them into an urban economy.
Absolutely. Because that's really where they will get their income from.
And that's where their market is, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
So you need to bring them to the market.
Absolutely.
You can't take the market to them.
Yes.
So let me ask you, if you were to do a brand description of Aazol, what would the brand description be?
So the name Aazol means Aji ka ghar. Nani ka ghar in Marathi. Nani ka ghar. And I think the feeling that all of us, when we in our summer holidays used to go to Nani ka ghar, and the love we got and the care we got and the authenticity we felt with our nanis.
Right.
I think that's really the true essence of the brand.
Okay. After I heard the whole story from you earlier, and I looked into Aazol and I found the motivation of saying, hey, these are the women who anyway know the recipes. These are the women who know the recipes because they have actually they were born with those recipes, right? They don't need to be taught. In fact, they could probably teach others how to create these things. But yet, knowing those recipes takes them nowhere. What do you do? I mean, I would assume that every village has a bunch of women who know some traditional recipe, which is maybe even disappearing from our consciousness because we just don't have access to it, you know? So, and then to say, okay, how do I channelize this into a money-making venture? And how do these women then become economic entities? So today they are economic entities.
Absolutely. So, there are two parts to it. One part, of course, is, as you very rightly said, the recipes. We are losing touch with our traditional wisdom.
Yeah.
We are losing touch with what our mothers and grandmothers knew was good for us, for our bodies, right? Through the recipes that are getting lost. I think equally the other thing that was getting lost, Sangeeta, was the farmers not growing the grains that are endemic to their region.
Correct.
So just to give you an example, basmati, everybody thinks basmati is the best rice. But actually in Maharashtra, there's a beautiful rice variety called Indrayani, which is soft and sticky and aromatic. But because of this whole desire,
fabulously aromatic.
Absolutely. The house just resonates with the aroma.
Yeah.
And because of basmati, or because jasmine rice from international sources was seen as a sticky rice, Indrayani was not finding a market. So again, working with those farmer communities to say, no, we will create the market for Indrayani, you just grow it. And then helping them source the best grains, the best seeds, working with Krishi Vigyan Kendra to ensure that, the soil is taken care of. They know the best practices to grow high quality Indrayani. I think all that is the second part. So rediscovering heritage grains and helping the farmer communities grow what is endemic to the region is also part of the products that we provide.
While doing all this, while creating awareness, while supporting farmers and self-help groups, your stated mission is to be a for-profit company.
Yeah. So with a bit of a correction. So yes, absolutely right that we want to be for-profit, because I don't believe that you can build a sustainable organization based on charity and grants that you keep on getting. So sustainability of an organization will come when it is self-serving, self-running, and having enough cash and profit to grow and expand. Having said that, we are not chasing the game of profit, which then translates into valuation, which then translates into exit. That is not at all our game plan.
Okay.
Our game plan is we want to be profitable for sustainability, not profitable for valuation. And we want to grow and expand so that we are able to touch the lives of more and more and more women and farmer communities. So if I'm working with 1,000 women and farmers, currently I would like to work with 1 lakh, 10 lakh. And for that, you need to grow the business to be able to create that kind of marketplace for these farmers and women.
My curiosity is that, do you have advice for food entrepreneurs, to-dos and not-to-dos kind of list? Have you got some, ready reckoner for them that you can share?
Yeah, certainly. So I think 2-3 things I would say to food entrepreneurs. One clearly is that, yes, we all talk about health. Yes, we all talk about authenticity, provenance, and all of these are important and increasingly becoming more important. But at the end of the day, the food that is going into our bodies, the customer first looks at taste. So unless it is tasty, other things can fall by the wayside.
Correct.
So I think a lot of dedication and concentration on the palate, on what works for different taste buds, etc., is very, very important. The second thing, of course, is, if you want high quality, you should be willing to pay the price for it. I see
the entrepreneurs should be willing to pay the price.
The customers. So as entrepreneurs, we should evangelize this repeatedly.
I get that. Okay.
That if you want high quality, you should be willing to pay the price for it. I mean, I look at some of the products that are available and, masalas, 40 rupee masalas. What is going in that masala? I question, because I know the cost of a garam masala, akkha garam masala. Or let's say there are 7 ingredients listed down. You just add up the cost of the 7 ingredients and that'll come to 100 rupees. So on what basis is this product being sold at 60 rupees and 40 rupees?
Okay.
I think somewhere we need to, as consumers, question, as entrepreneurs, teach that or evangelize that.
How evangelize how?
You should be ready for the fact that from day one, you will not become a 100 crore company.
Right.
Okay. So in this inordinate need to chase scale quickly, I find that entrepreneurs are then willing to say that, okay, let me cut corners, because I want volumes. At any cost, I want volumes which will translate into scale. Okay. So for that, then what gets compromised? The product only. The starting point of anything is unit economics. The starting point of anything is the COGS. So you keep on compromising on the product. Because you're chasing scale. So you should be okay. Firstly, I think you should be very, very okay that I'm okay to be a niche. I'm okay to start with only 1,000 customers, who will then become 5,000, who will then become 10,000. But I will do it slowly and surely. And
who will become your evangelists?
Who will become evangelists? And over a period of time, the circle will only grow. As long as you are clear about the fact that I'm going to give a high quality product. I'm not going to compromise on the quality. And growth will come. Growth will come. It may take 5 years extra, but it will come.
So what has been on the ground impact of Aazol so far?
Yeah. So
You've been around what, 5 years?
Yeah, this is the 5th year.
5th year.
This is the 5th year. One big thing that has happened is earlier what used to happen, because most of our farmers, as you're very well aware, are, subsistence farmers.
Yeah.
So they just are able to eke out a meager living to manage themselves. No savings, no other, benefits or long-term finances at their command. So during the non-harvest time, then many of these women would go off to a Gujarat or a Bombay to come and do dehadi labor. So they would leave their either children or bring them with them and then work as laborers
on construction sites. Yeah.
But as a result of Aazol, for the last 2.5 years now, the women have not come and have had to leave their villages.
Oh, that's amazing.
And therefore the impact immediately on their children, on the health, on the education. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And many of them, some of them are from tribal areas, and for them leaving the land and going somewhere else was
It's a wrench.
It's a wrench, and because land is what they worship. Land is their god and goddess, right?
Yeah.
So that they don't have to leave their villages. That income is coming to them in the places that they reside, that they are making the products that they always knew how to make.
Correct.
And those products are finding a market in the country. So apart from, of course, the financial implication and then the larger livelihood implication, lifestyle implication on the families, there is also a huge sense of self-esteem. Mera product Bombay mein bik raha hai.
Yeah.
Suddenly they are speaking confidently, they are taking more decisions, they are important members of the family and the village now.
And they would probably be told ki aur banao
and role models.
Yes.
We worked in corporate India.
Yeah.
We know the impact role models has on the next generation.
Yeah.
So more and more women then saying that we want to become like Savitri Tai or Pushpa Tai,
Yeah. So thank you so much for this, Apurva. This has been an electrifying conversation, and I couldn't have asked for a better guest, because I found someone who's working in social impact. I found someone has such strong views about what women can do to grow at work. I've learned a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hello and namaste. I hope you've been watching these conversations that I have brought to you with some very remarkable women in our country. The conversations, as you know, are about anything and everything that matters to a woman, and then, of course, by corollary, to society. If you are enjoying these conversations, do please like, share, subscribe so that others in your circle can also enjoy them. Thank you. Keep watching.